Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Honorable Ron Villanueva, the Executive Director of the Coastal Virginia Chamber of Commerce. And as part of our Civic Engagement Platform, we are here to help connect our elected officials, our candidates, with the voters and the citizens of our great region. And today we have an honored guest. We have the Honorable Jessica Abbott, who is the current Kempsville member and who has been on council for one term now.
Yeah.
One successful term, I might add it. And as a former council member, I used to have that title of youngest ever elected. And I'm looking at Jessica's age, and she was elected at age 27, which shows tremendous leadership in you. Jessica, welcome to our show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be back and excited to be in campaign season again, even though it's a very strange campaign season. But I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate you all doing this. This is a great asset to our community, and it's definitely well needed.
Jessica, we know City Council has faced some serious obstacles the last couple of years, the shooting and now with the COVID pandemic. You as a leader have shown tremendous fortitude along with the other council members in adapting our city towards protecting people's health and, more importantly, protecting businesses. Could you talk about the impact to small businesses and some of the initiatives that you and council have initiated?
Sure. Well, we've really, since I got on in 2016, I ran in 2016 and my term started in 2017. And as you know, we had Hurricane Matthew in 16. And so coming into that new year in 2017, we were really faced with a glaring infrastructure issue that had really, I think that we had always kind of known was there, but it really was in our face, and we had to really acknowledge it and start our planning process for how we were going to fund our infrastructure issues, start addressing sea level rise, and our maintenance backlog. So that was kind of our first hurdle. And then through that process, we lost our city manager shortly after the May 31st shooting. So we had a terrible tragedy, which I think also kind of opened our eyes to some internal issues that we needed to address as an organization. And then we lost our city manager. We were in the middle of our disparity study, which showed a procurement issue in the city, which I was a big proponent of and a big leader in that, getting that passed and implemented. And then as we were kind of coming through the tunnel of the tragedy and hiring a new city manager, we got faced with COVID, and what we thought was going to be our budget in March didn't end up being our budget. We had to do a lot of renegotiating that so that we were in line with how we thought revenues coming in through the city were going to be. We needed to face the reality of how our businesses were going to be impacted. And I was really fortunate that I got to really be a big part of how the budget was created. Part of the things that we were trying to address was when making sure our disparity study remained fully funded. The city manager had recommended cutting that initially, and that was our interim city manager. But knowing that we were going to be facing the issues with our small businesses, to me, it was a priority that we maintain that program to make sure that all of the goals we were trying to meet with the disparity study were met, and that we weren't perpetuating a delay in a bigger way at one of the worst points in time in our economy. So that was a big part. We were able to continue to fully fund that. We've had a lot of pass-through money through the CARES Act that we've been circulating in the form of grants to our small businesses. Basically, if you could show an economic hardship due to COVID, you were eligible, and that program has been very successful. It's maxed out both rounds, and we ended up going to a lottery because of it, so that we were serving the greatest group, the most people possible. We also implemented a suspension on the meals tax, which I was quoted in a way of saying, if you saw $5 on the street, would you pick it up? And the answer is yes, you would. So while it was a small savings on family's tax bill at the end of their dinner, it is a couple bucks that goes a long way, especially if you're a family who's struggling through COVID and you wanted to, treat yourself. And it was also a marketing technique that our restaurants could use. So that was a big success. We suspended it through July. The meals tax was not as, our restaurants' revenue was up higher than we anticipated, and I think that's due in part to the marketing technique that was able to be implemented. We've been really focused on making ourselves the destination to be a vacation spot if you are able and healthy to travel, and we've really marketed to our neighbors to be that place. And overall, the city's doing really well with our response to COVID, and I think we're a safe place, and I think in a lot of ways it's kind of enforced the bond that we have with our small businesses in our community.
And some tremendous initiatives, Jessica. You said it best. We're not out of the woods yet with regards to COVID. Do you see a continuation of some of the programs that you've implemented for small business? You talk about 2 rounds, all the money's gone now for grants. I mean, that just shows you small business is still hurting. So where does council go from here?
Well, I think so the way we decided to set up the budget this year, obviously the state code required us to pass a budget, but we decided early on in that process that we would be doing regular reviews of it so that we could be flexible and readjust spending based on how revenues were coming in. Our revenue forecast is much brighter than we actually anticipated it, but you always kind of plan for the worst, and if you get the best things, then you have money to spend. So the overall goal of council is to look at how that revenue comes in, and then if there is money available for assistance, that's where we want to put it. And we want to really target it to the people that need it most. That way we're not leaving anyone behind through this process. But one of the things that I didn't mention was we've implemented a lot of flexibility with our small businesses, particularly in restaurants, since they had probably the hardest restrictions placed on them because of COVID. But we started to allow restaurants to put their seating in their parking lots and on their sidewalks and kind of create these little parklets off of their primary buildings, and it's been hugely successful. And I said it in a council meeting. I said, I hope we don't lose these good things, these small adjustments we made that didn't seem like a big deal, but really improved the quality and the character of our restaurants and our communities. And I think the seating in the parking lot's a great example of that, because as you know, many of our shopping centers are overparked. They're largely empty for most of the day. And when you gave that restaurant the opportunity to put 12 tables in the parking lot, you essentially expanded their footprint and potential revenue reach. You made it hopefully something a little more attractive. There's one restaurant I know that put a bunch of tables in their parking lot, and then it was so successful they bought these kind of gazebo-like structures that they placed over top of them, and they hung string lights, and it's now this really ambient, beautiful place to go sit, have a drink, eat your dinner, even though you're in the middle of a strip mall in a parking lot. And those kind of things enhance the character of the restaurant. They enhance the character of these communities. And I hope that kind of stuff we continue to say, you know what, they didn't need those 20 parking spaces. So let's let them keep that like that. And hopefully when we're out of COVID and they're continuing their indoor seating, they get to continue their outdoor seating too.
Jessica, a lot of the initiatives you're talking about are like incredible, like these small initiatives. I remember the resistance on open air cafes from the Restaurant Association many years ago. And now here we are, and you're saying how incredibly successful they are. And it does add a new element to our restaurants. It gives them flexibility and capacity. Do you see the meals tax? I know that it was a 2-month moratorium on freezing the meals tax, but I think it's been implemented back. Do you see you guys going back to the moratorium?
I don't know if we'd go back to it in this budget cycle. I would be really interested in looking at the data once it's all in. I know the last update we got from our budget office said that not everything had been reported yet. I would be interested to know if what the data says in terms of did it increase people in seats. It's going to be hard to measure because there was such a drop off of people going out and eating. But I do think that that's something we should probably look at. If it showed a significant incentive for people to go out to eat because their bill was $3, $4, $5 cheaper. And if you think about, I know with my family, when I go out to dinner, I think about, okay, so if we sit down in a restaurant, it's going to be $40. And if we get a drink, it's going to be $50. And I got to pay the tax and we've got a tip. And all of that, those little bucks start adding up if you're, an average normal family. So I think that if it's something that incentivizes people to go into a restaurant and enjoy their meal and enjoy their community, then we should really seriously consider, is that revenue something that we could shore up somewhere else? Or is that revenue paying for something we don't need anymore? Or is that, I think we should look for the efficiencies. And I think that's what small businesses are facing in COVID, right? They're looking at what efficiencies have been created as a result of this forced work environment. And the city should take a note from that. We should be looking at these efficiencies as well.
I think you could appreciate this, Jessica, being a member from the Kempsville district. Virginia Beach is more than just the oceanfront. It's districts like Kempsville, Centerville, and Bayside that make it strong. Where do you see economic diversification? And do you see a pivot of the strategy that the city's implemented with regards to, build up the oceanfront and it pays for itself, and then here we're chasing after different new strategies. Where do you see the city headed with this?
Sure. So I remember now what I was going to say. So one of the things that I've always thought we struggled with was how do we grow our hometown talent? And for me, what we have to really start looking at is if we want to have the next Starbucks, if we want to have the next Amazon, if we want to have the next major manufacturer, which is really where the growth industries are, in my perspective. I think you have growth industry in medical. I think you probably have growth industry in the educational business. But where I think we'll probably see the most growth is in manufacturing of some kind. And I don't think it's a secret that the city is a very beautiful place and expects beautiful uses as a result. We don't want to have, a dog food factory like they have in Denver. So we have to start looking at those manufacturing places that are maybe light industrial that could maybe fit in some of our aging shopping centers. They need a footprint of 30, 40, 50,000 square feet. So we could potentially put them in one of the old Farm Fresh boxes or the Kmart box or whatever other big box store that didn't make it. You could build that building to make it look beautiful on the outside, but really on the inside, it's some form of manufacturing. Because if you look at trend data, people shopping online is way, way up, which is why Amazon is going to be and continues to be such a big player, because there's going to be, you look at like places like Best Buy, they're turning into distribution centers. They're not retail anymore. So I think we have to be forward thinking like that, but at the same time, look at who's in our community right now, who is designing or inventing or creating something that's going to create an efficiency in our distribution marketplace, that's going to invent something that makes lives so much easier. And then how do we set them up so that when they start growing up into that big thing, they stay here? Because if you use Starbucks as an example, Seattle wouldn't have attracted Starbucks there. They stayed there because that's where they grew up and their community embraced them and wanted them to stay. And so that's where I really think we're going to start diversifying our job force, is if we try to grow the businesses we have so that they become the next big thing in our area. I think we have to look at other expanding industries, like in agriculture, there's a lot of like hydroponic gardening. I think we need to look at solar. I think there's some other markets that we can capture, and those aren't really job dense, or those aren't really job creators, but we need to look at those kind of potential revenue sources for the city too. We need to maintain our military. We need to do what we can to be a good partner with the Navy. And we need to keep our oceanfront being a great place to visit. People love coming to our city. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I grew up in Pennsylvania and we vacationed here. That's why we moved here. We moved here because my parents loved vacationing here. And it's funny because I have been very critical of the spending at the oceanfront, but it's not out of it's not because I don't think we shouldn't, it's because there's parts of our city that do feel left out. And one of the other things, and this isn't really a part of your question, but we're trying to find a way to enhance the oceanfront so that it's not just a resort destination for visitors, it's a place that our residents want to be too. And once we figure that out, I think that makes the resort successful, it makes our community successful, and we start to take ownership back in that soul that is really important to our city.
Well, I think when I was on council, we wrestled with that idea, and we implemented free parking for a little bit, but then we found out, man, we got to pay for these parking garages. So
Yeah.
it was reduced, and I guess it's still reduced, right? But
I don't know. When I went down there a couple weekends ago, it was like $10 a car still.
wow.
So it's not cheap. And we went down with some out of town friends, and I felt bad about having them pay for their parking. So I paid for both of our cars to park for like 2 hours. And I do wonder if we need to look at some kind of resident model. Like, so we say maybe we still have to charge for parking, but if you can have a driver's license with a Virginia Beach address, you get it for $3 instead of 10. Or maybe Thursday nights are free resident parking. And I think looking at kind of those marketing techniques again that drive our residents down to the oceanfront, they get to start taking ownership back in their beach. They see all the great businesses that are down there. I mean, if you don't, and this is something I run into a lot, and I'm sure you run into it a lot too, people in Kempsville and Bayside and Centerville don't visit our beach. They just don't, and I had an event in Caroline Farms, and I was talking to a couple of the neighbors there, and they said, oh, what's going on at the oceanfront? I haven't been down there in years. And they don't know that the Vibe District is a hop-in place. They don't know that there are all these really great restaurants down there. They don't know that that we've redone the boardwalk because it's been so long since they've been there. And I think there's a messaging internally that has to happen to start bringing the people from the other side of the city down to the resort, and that ownership, I think, propels us in a lot of different ways.
We've got like 8 strategic growth areas in our city. A lot of emphasis on the oceanfront and town center. We've done some great things. Council's done some great things with regards to the Princess Anne Commons area. Do you see any new initiatives coming in that area and around the city?
In Princess Anne Commons or in general?
In general.
I think if you asked any council member, they'd say generally there are always new initiatives being worked on. I think everyone has kind of their own vision of what those look like, and the prioritization of that is probably where we struggle. I know for me, I think we have to really look at the Norfolk Southern right-of-way because it is the vein that connects a lot of those strategic growth areas together. And it needs to become something. I have and continue to advocate for some kind of urban trail system that really expands the walkability and connectivity of our city in an immediate and inexpensive way. I'm not opposed to looking at some kind of transportation system that could be in conjunction with it, but we have, we've talked a lot about what place the scooters at the oceanfront serve in our resort district and in our neighborhoods. That actually really is an interesting conversation because I felt the most resistance about the scooters towards the oceanfront. But in Kempsville, I have lots of constituents that reach out to me on a regular basis saying, when are they going to come back? We liked being able to jump on one and run up to, the grocery store, or jump on one and run up to the gas station, or run quick errands on them. And obviously COVID derailed our strategy and implementation on what those would look like. But imagine if the Norfolk Southern right-of-way was some kind of walking trail and you could pick up a scooter at Newtown Road and zip down to the oceanfront. I mean, those things pop out like 15 miles an hour. Yep. That could become a feasible means of transportation for a lot of our people that live in the like Kempsville Bayside area of the city, but work at the oceanfront, and it's inexpensive. And so this kind of goes into my view of transportation. We have to be looking for those efficiencies and those inexpensive enhancements to our existing transportation system, while at the same time looking at what's the future of transportation, what does it really look like, and what's the best investment for the future versus looking at what is immediate and available right now to market. So I think there are small things we can do that connect those growth areas, that make them more valuable. And I think that plays into our transportation plans and how we kind of grow up as a city.
Jessica, again, our citizens are honored to have great leaders like you on council. How do you see yourself being a cohesive leader with regards to current council, and where do you see this council going with regards to coastal flooding or SWAM initiatives?
Sure. Well, I'm fortunate that I have a great relationship with everyone on council. There's not anybody I can't talk to, and that's really that's a great benefit. I think people's opinion of government is very. I think when you close your eyes and think about it, you think about Congress or the Senate, and it's all of these different people who don't know each other, who don't have personal relationships with everyone, and it's a big space. We're 11 people. We know each other. We are. There are relationships and friendships that are made there, professional, but it's very hard to ignore someone, and not that you'd want to anyway. So having good relationships with each other is paramount to being successful at the local level. In terms of like how we tackle these things, I think with coastal flooding, we're going to have to go to a bond referendum. We have $500 million worth of flood projects that we know of and have accounted for that have to get done. That there's not an alternative to not doing. And the only way you ramp up to accomplish that is you have to go to the public and say, we have to pay for this somehow. So I think that most of council is resolved on, we got to go the route of a bond referendum. And that is really going to be the key to scaling those projects, making sure we get the best competitive bid for them, and we're able to accomplish them as many of them in the shortest period of time. And as far as SWAM initiatives go, I mean, we're a learning organization, and I said this at a forum recently. We didn't know we weren't meeting the bar, and now that we know better, we have to do better. We have to really engage those minority and those women-owned businesses. We have to engage veteran-owned businesses, and we have to talk about how do we keep our dollars local, because that's how everybody's ship is going to rise in terms of how we survive COVID, and in terms of how we grow that hometown talent. So I think those are all just big things that are really important to me in general. I think we have great little pockets of communities that if we started engaging in a more aggressive way, I think we'd find that we have a lot of culture and a lot of passionate people who have really big potential. I have the honor to get to go cut a ribbon on Saturday for this little coffee shop in Kempsville, and I'm telling you, they're going to.
Oh yeah, where's that?
It's a culture cafe. They're a vegan bar.
Ooh.
I'm telling you, this lady who owns it is, you see her and you feel her energy. And she of course was going to invite me to the ribbon cutting anyway, but I've just been emailing her, hey, when's it going to be? When are you opening? I can't wait to come. I'm so excited for you. And there is something really special that's going to happen for her, and getting to be able to be in her orbit is so important to me. And so I think if we get there, if we get to that level with people, we're going to see these really exciting things happen that are going to happen on their own, regardless of our intervention or participation. But if we can be there for it, think of how much better and bigger it could be.
Wow. Jessica, tremendous conversation going on. You and I could go on and on. I mean, you got so many great things to say. Let me ask you, why should the voters elect you in November, and how do you feel about Virginia Beach?
Sure. Well, I ran in 2016 because I didn't feel like there was anybody on council that knew what it was like to be a millennial in this city. And as you know, in 2016, that's all that was being talked about. The millennials, we got to keep the millennials here. And I said, well, if we want to keep the millennials here, we probably should have a millennial in office. So I got very tired of that term quickly. But I do think it's important that we have young people represented in our local government. It's important that we have young working mothers in our local government. Those are people that are they're not looked at very often, because a mom has to put their kid to bed at 7 o'clock and make dinner and do that whole thing. And they don't get to participate in the community meetings. They don't get to participate in watching the city council sessions, because they're too busy. They're so busy doing the things that are the most important in their life. So to me, it meant a lot to go and be a representative for that group of people that didn't feel like they were being seen or heard. And I think that it adds an extra layer of insight to the decisions we make as a body. But more importantly, my husband's a school teacher in Virginia Beach. My son just started kindergarten. I have 2 small businesses here. If the city isn't successful, I feel the real consequences of that in 10, 15, 20 years. Because the decisions that are being made today, those consequences get felt that far off a lot of the time. And so we have to be mindful of that. And I think that that's a perspective that isn't on council and that I get to bring to the table and now I guess it's not fair to say, because we have Aaron and Michael on there with me, but I think the 3 of us are a value added to the council in terms of how do we keep this city young? How do we keep it moving forward? And how do we balance out that legacy knowledge that exists on the council, which is really valuable. But I'm a big proponent of transparency, diversity, and I just really love the city, and service is in my heart, and this is a great way that I get to fulfill that passion, and I hope I get to do it again for another 4 years.
Well, Jessica Abbott, the Coastal Virginia Chamber of Commerce is honored to have you today. There's an election around the corner, and we hope that our citizens get out there and vote, because local elections matter the most. Thank you for your leadership, Jessica, and we wish you much success in your endeavors. May the force be with you.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, and I really appreciate the mission of what you all are trying to do.
Thanks, Jessica. You take care.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Bye.